If you love movies and movie discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am The Wiz! And I am here to review the 1985 murder mystery comedy Clue, starring Tim Curry, Madeline Kahn, Leslie Ann Warren, Martin Mull, and Michael McKean, directed by Jonathan Lynn. I think when Clue is discussed a lot when it comes to films, it's discussed for its uniqueness on one key thing, and that is the fact that it has multiple endings. This is something that's become a little commonplace in video games where they have multiple endings in, let's say, an RPG, where the decisions that you make affect the outcome of what happens as the story goes. But to have it in movies is very unique. And what Clue did back when it was released in '85 is they basically shot the film, but they shot 3 different endings. And depending on what theater you watched it in, you got either ending A, B, or C. And that was a pretty unique concept for the time, and I believe not many, if not any, really, films did it after that. At least I don't remember, to be completely honest. There might have been, but I don't remember hearing of any other films that have done this since. So in that way, Clue is very unique. So why don't we get down to it? Let's get into the review of Clue, directed by Jonathan Lynn. Before we get into the review, let's go into the plot. Clue basically has all 6 characters from the board game. Mrs. White, Miss Scarlet, Mr. Green, Mrs. Peacock, Professor Plum, and I think Colonel Mustard as well. I forgot about him as well. They have the 6 characters that are in the board game. The way that they have them in the same place is they're all summoned to a mansion where they are confronted with the person that is blackmailing them, and then that person gets murdered suddenly, and they have to figure out who murdered that person. I will say this before I get into the review. It is very rare for a movie to use the property in a way that reminds people of the property other than a slight wink and a nod. I did like that aspect of this movie, but we'll get more into what I think of the film. So let's get to my first point in the review of Clue. And my first point is, there is some witty verbal dialogue. Yeah, when it comes to the comedy in this movie, I think the most effective use of comedy in Clue is its verbal dialogue. It reminds me of dialogue in films from like the 30s, 40s, and 50s, the black and white ones that are very verbose, very fast, very quick, use a lot of puns, not really a lot of puns, but a lot of verbal play to make it a little confusing for the character or anything. Just, it's kind of silly in that way. And with that, I actually kind of enjoy that type of dialogue. It isn't the most comedy that is in this movie. Most of the comedy is of another sort. But when this type of comedy was coming up, I actually enjoyed what they had for the most part. My second point, the lacking physical comedy. Here's the other part of the comedy they had for Clue that I don't think really worked very well. A lot of pratfalls, a lot of falling down, use of dead bodies in comedy, a bunch of comedy that really did not work very well in this movie. A lot of jokes about women's breasts, which, once or twice I'm like, okay, cool. As much as they did in this movie, I was like, okay, maybe you're relying a little too much. But like the pratfalls, the running around, it didn't really work in this movie, I think. I think it just did not feel right with the movie itself. And my third point, multiple endings are neat, but only one is good. So I mentioned that in the beginning of the review, or the pre-review on this, that this movie had multiple endings. It's very unique for a movie that had multiple endings. The problem is, 2 things. The one problem I had is because it's on streaming now, and I don't think streamers want to give you a separate stream for ending A, B, and C, what they do in this is they take the movie, and then they give you ending A, and then they put a placard, then ending B, and then a placard, then ending C. And in that instance, I don't think that works very well because it just seems very muddled at the end. Like, oh, which one do you want it to like? I was like, just give me one. Why even give me the other 2 if the other 2 are not good? Just give me one that's good. And I think that just kind of felt messy at the end because it kind of felt pretty unsatisfying, honestly. And I think, but the main criticism that I have in this, which I think is most relevant to the movie, is that 2 of the endings are not good. Like, 2 of the endings either not. I wouldn't say they don't work, but they're not satisfying. They're not funny. They're not interesting. The only good ending, the one I thought was good, was C, which I thought was good for what it was, but it wasn't like great. It didn't like save the film for me, but it was fine. Like there was a funny joke at the end that I appreciated. I thought was pretty funny, and then that was it. And I think that's why I liked that one the most. But otherwise, like the endings that they had to this movie were really not that great. Okay, so who do I recommend this for? You like camp. Okay, so if you like camp comedies, if you like, well, I shouldn't say camp comedies, but campy comedies. Comedies that are corny. Comedies that are very tongue-in-cheek. I think you would really like this film if you're into that. The second I would recommend it for is if you want a very light crime film. So I would say for somebody who's really into crime films, if you want to get a significant other who doesn't like crime films because they don't like the blood, the violence, the nasty stuff, give them Clue to watch with you, and I think you might enjoy it. That really is a very specific kind of thing. Like I don't know who would be into true crime, but wouldn't like violence or death. So if you fit that bill, go for it. I don't know who you are. If you are that person, leave a comment on social media or on YouTube and let me know. Who do I not recommend this for? You prefer verbal comedy to be biting. There's a reason why I mentioned that the verbal comedy is very much like the 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's very tame. It's a lot of verbal back and forth, confusing the other, kind of like Three Stooges like. Well, Three Stooges is more physical comedy, but like I would say maybe the Marx Brothers, no, that's physical comedy too. But okay, but like it is very reminiscent of comedy from like the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Lots of wordplay, lots of confusing somebody else to say something when they don't mean to say it. When it's verbal comedy, I prefer to be a little bit biting, or really biting if need be, but it really isn't in this movie. It's very tame. So if you don't like that, skip. I would not recommend this for people if you like your crime comedies dark. That's the weird thing about Clue here. A lot of comedies that base itself around crime are usually pretty dark when they work. They really take the blood and guts thing into like a very tongue-in-cheek level. This movie is not dark at all. It is very slapstick. It's very light. And if you like crime comedies but you want to be more on the dark side, I would say just skip Clue at this point. Overall, I do not recommend Clue. I thought the verbal comedy was okay, but the rest of the film just did not work for me. I didn't find the film very funny. I didn't find it very entertaining. I appreciated what it was trying to do, and I appreciate that they were trying to make it a lot like the board game in a lot of different ways. Overall, I just don't think it was that entertaining or that funny of a movie. I think the physical comedy just did not work in this movie at all. I'm kind of surprised this has such a cult following. I think a lot of people do like Tim Curry, and I think that's what really helps that along. But I just don't see what's so funny about this movie, and I just can't recommend this movie at all. So, yeah, I do not recommend Clue. I didn't find it very funny. I didn't find it very enjoyable. But, hey, to each his own. If you are one of those people who like crime comedies or crime movies but want it really light, give it a shot. But otherwise, just don't even bother. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you just listened to. Thank you for listening to this review. If you want to know what we're reviewing in the next couple of days, you can look on the screen right now to see what's coming up next. If you like what you heard, go ahead and leave a like on this video. If you want to discuss your opinion on the film or the review itself, please leave a comment. And if you want to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for listening. I will talk to you next time.